Well, good morning again from Charleston. We're here at the Old South Carriage tours, and we're going to take a little tour around Charleston. I don't know if you can see the little horsey behind us.
He's not little.
Yeah, far from little. And I hope you enjoyed the experience. Well, we are loving
The real world.
We were bad people in Charleston.
So this gorgeous boy in the front is Leo. Leo is a Belgian draft horse. His collar sits 6 feet above the ground. We call that 18 hands high. His body weight, he's a big old chunker right here. He's 2,100 pounds. So he's over a ton of pure horse muscle. We'll get started. I'll tell you, we're on Church Street. This little street in Charleston is not terribly long, but we have 3 congregations worshiping on Church Street in Charleston that date to the 1680s. That's a long, long time ago. The oldest of the 3 congregations are those folks right in front of us. 343 years ago, they were the Church of England. They are still the Church of England. That is St. Philip's Anglican Church. The first church building stood on that site for over 100 years before it burned. The building you're looking at dates to 1838 with the steeple 10 years later. As we turn right, you guys check out that steeple and see if you can tell it's got a tilt to it. Anybody see it? You got it. Anybody, you guys see it in the back? It leans very, very slightly to the left. So does the congregation. Slight left leaning. Why would that be? What would cause that?
hurricane.
Hurricane is a really good guess. What else you got?
Earthquake.
Earthquake is correct. We had a horrible earthquake in 1886. They believe if there'd been a Richter scale, would have measured 7.3 on a Richter scale. Hit Charleston about 10 o'clock at night. Lasted for over a minute. They described it as the ground rolled like the waves of the sea. So it settled a church steeple 8 inches on the backside. This little building will be open later today. That's the Gunpowder Magazine from 1713. That's the oldest public building in Charleston right there. It housed gunpowder for the old colony. The walls are about 3 feet thick. Ceiling, brick vault like a tunnel. Attic is filled with tons and tons of sand, which is all just weird. Here's what they thought. They thought if there was an explosion of gunpowder, they thought the thick walls would send the blast up instead of out. And if the blast went up, they anticipated that would cause the ceiling to collapse. If the ceiling collapsed, they wanted that to release all the sand to put out the fire. That's what they thought would happen. You're already grinning. We don't think it would work out that way. We based that assumption on everything we learned when the other one blew up. Meeting Street seems to be a strange name for a street. It gets its name because there used to be a meeting house where this church now stands. A meeting house was anybody who was not the church. There's the church in the background, the Church of England. That was the church. Others who worshiped here at the old white meeting house were Scottish Presbyterians, English Congregationalists, French Huguenots. But the old white meeting house where they worshiped, sadly that burned down. But we built ourselves a new one. Sadly that burned down. So we built the first circular church on that site. I'm sorry to tell you that the first circular church burned down. And you're looking at the second circular church from 1891. But that is the oldest graveyard in Charleston right there. The oldest marked grave in Charleston is the brick vault toward that left staircase of the social hall. 1695, members of the Simmons family are interred there. They're not interred above ground. I guess that would be an oxymoron anyway. We bury in the ground here in Charleston, not New Orleans. We're above ground. So that's just a marker. There are older burials in that graveyard, but they were marked with wood. So they've long since rotted away. That, having been built out of brick, has survived. You surprised I told you we had a few fires? We've almost burned down 5 times. 5 times. We call it a great fire if it consumes more than 100 buildings. And 5 times that has happened in Charleston. The worst fire we ever had was 1861. That's the one that burned down the circular church behind us, burned everything behind us, came burning through here. This pink hotel was spared. The Mills House Hotel was spared because Robert E. Lee is there. The general of the Confederate forces is here. He's credited with directing the staff of the hotel, telling them to wet the blankets and hang them out the windows. They quite literally wrapped the building in wet blankets to save it from destruction. Now, unfortunately, Robert E. Lee was not here 100 years later when the termites got a hold of it. So the building you're looking at is a 1970s replica of the building that survived the fire of 1860. All right, when y'all woke up this morning, did you say to yourself, gosh, I hope I get to see Charleston from the top? Y'all want to climb to the high ground of Charleston? Y'all know we call the low country, right? All right, get ready. When we get over this manhole cover, you're going to be at the summit of Charleston. Not quite, almost. It's coming right here. 144 inches above sea level.
144 inches.
That's King Street. It was part of the King's Highway. By the 1690s, you could have driven overland from Charlestown to Boston on the King's Highway. It's now known in Charleston for shopping and dining and nightlife. And if you're not familiar with nightlife in Charleston, that means somebody stayed up past 8:30. Look at the bark on these trees. Cinnamon color. We call it a cinnamon crepe myrtle. Cinnamon crepe myrtles bloom white. They just finished blooming. That's why they got these little balls. That's crepe myrtle too, but no cinnamon color. Those bloom pink. They have been blooming all summer. There's still some blossoms on this one. They bloom the 100 hottest days of summer. So you have just made it on the end of that little blooming season. Take a look down these folks' driveway. A really quaint view of chimney tops and church steeples. Isn't that pretty? So those two church steeples, you'll see them again when we cross Archdale Street. Archdale, believe it or not, was a Quaker governor we had back in the 1690s. Quakers were here early. They petered out. They were not real fond of the institution of slavery, as the rest of the city certainly was. So they found other places to go live. But look down the street. The one closest to us is the Unitarian Church, begun in 1770. And the one furthest from us, the Lutheran Church from 1818. So many German Protestants, that's what Lutherans are, German Protestants. So many settled this area that this was called Deutschtown of Charleston. All right, so we have just started our tour and you have seen the Anglican Church, the Congregational Church, the Lutheran Church, the Unitarian Church. You guys know what Charleston's nickname is? Almost, Holy City. We call ourselves Holy City. And it's because we have always been somewhat religiously tolerant. The founding constitution of Carolina, the members that founded this colony were Church of England. But they wrote down in the Constitution that also welcome here were Jews, heathens, and dissenters. And if you don't know that word dissenter is a non-Church of England Christian Protestant. So let's think about that little list of who's welcome in Old Charleston. Church of England, Jews, heathens, dissenters. Who didn't make the cut?
Catholic.
Not welcome here the first 100 years of the colony. Great Britain is at war with France and Spain. Two Catholic monarchies. Had you been a Catholic in Old Charleston, you would have been suspected of being a spy. But eventually we got Catholics. Eventually they built a cathedral on the left-hand side. What you're looking at right there is not it. You got it. You got it in the fire of 1861. When that fire marched through here, it burned the church. Their fire insurance had lapsed by a week. It took them 30 years to come up with the money to build the structure you see there. It was built 1891 to 1907. 1907, they ran out of money before they got the top of that church steeple on. They sat without the top of that steeple for a long, long time. While they sat, this city passed the first preservation laws in the United States. We passed the 75-year rule. It says anything's been here 75 years cannot be altered. We still go by that. After 100 years, they asked permission to put the top of the church steeple on. What do you think we told them?
No.
They didn't like that. They came up with a brilliant counter argument. They explained patiently to the Board of Architectural Review that they weren't changing anything. They were merely finishing it. They were allowed to finish it in 2010. The bells went on in 2015. Here's a fun little side fact for you. That is built to Connecticut brownstone. No stone in Charleston. We have no quarries. We do not produce stone in the low country of South Carolina. You see stone here and you will see very little of it. It always comes from somewhere else. Now across the street from the Catholic Cathedral, that is a marble front on a circa 1800 house where that man in the yellow shirt is standing. Now you guys know who owns that house. Do not be surprised if Darius Rucker opens that window and tells that man to shoo away. That's Darius Rucker, the country singer, Hootie and the Blowfish. That's Darius's house. Darius just bought that a couple of years ago. He's done a television show with Design Network where he renovates that, called Rucker Reno. So you like that kind of stuff, look up Rucker Reno and stream that. Thank you, Leo. Leo concurs.
Yeah.
We're crossing Broad Street. That's Charleston's economic dividing line. Any other city, you just cross the railroad tracks. In any other city, the railroad tracks separate the haves from the have-nots. It kind of works like that in Charleston. Behind us are the haves. In front of us, have a whole heck of a lot more. Okay, behind us are rich people. In front of us, really, really rich people. It is no accident that Darius's house is on the south side of Broad Street. Welcome to South Broad. Price per square foot behind us, $500 a square foot. Price per square foot in front of us, $1,000 a square foot. Literally double. Had a lady on my carriage last month, sold a house down on Meeting Street for over $1,250 a square foot. So, welcome to South of Broad. Let's see. Teach you how to read our architecture a little bit. Oldest houses built right up to the street. Colonial and antebellum houses built up to the street. Victorians love the garden. If you see a front yard, that means it's usually a later house because somebody's, not always, but that's a good clue. When we build our houses right up to the street, leaves you no room for a front yard. We don't care. We'll hang a front yard off a house in a second. We do window boxes better than anybody. Now notice these little skinny houses. They're called Charleston single house. Step Hall. Look behind us. There's a classic Charleston single house. 2 rooms per floor, 1 room deep, front room, back room straddling a stair hall. This is how we stay cool. 1 room deep is easier to get a breeze in there, but the magic is that stair hall. You open the downstairs door and the upstairs door allows hot air to rise vertically in the middle of your house. When that hot air escapes, it sucks in cool air behind it. That chimney effect is what cooled these houses. We started building houses like this in the 1730s. We've never stopped. That chimney effect's what cools you on the beach. Hot air's rising off your beach sand, sucking in cool ocean air behind it. So whoever came up with the idea, and we got it from Barbados, that's what we build mostly. The Charleston single house, many of them do not have porches, but we just as often have porches. And a porch in Charleston is not called a porch. A porch is called a piazza. So look at your piazza. It's got a piazza door. That door doesn't get you in the house, just gets you on the piazza. That's a privacy device. So if the door were open, that meant come on in, we're expecting company, we'd love to have you. If the door were closed, do not disturb. Eyes on the sidewalk, mind your business, walk on by. Right? When these homes were built, it's scandalous to catch a glimpse of a woman's ankles. If you went past a closed piazza door in Old Charleston, you'd never look to see if Mrs. Jones was home. That was extremely bad manners. You might catch Mrs. Jones with more than ankles on display in the heat of August back there. So you mind your business and walk on by. All right, y'all remember what route we were awarded? Trad Street is what we're crossing. The route was 3A. 3A. And when I get a 3A, the first thing that pops in my head is, oh goodness, we're going down my favorite street in Charleston. I don't ever tell y'all that till we get here, in case we can't go down my favorite street in Charleston. Guess what we're doing? Going down my favorite street in Charleston. Welcome to Legree Street. L-E-G-A-R-E, Legree. I don't care where you're looking, you're going to find something fun to check out. But since we're on Legree Street, whoa, let's check out the Legree house on Legree Street. That is circa pull up just a little bit. Whoa. That is circa early 1800s, is 17,000 square feet of living space. Used to be the most expensive home to have sold in Charleston. Today it's the 4th most expensive home to have sold in Charleston. But these gates out here are more important than the house. They're called the Sword Gates of Charleston. They were created by a German ironsmith named Christopher Werner. Christopher Werner was commissioned by the guardhouse of Charleston to create a set of gates. Guardhouse like the jailhouse. So that's why there's a military motif. You see swords running horizontally, spears running vertically. Christopher misunderstood the order. It was for a set of gates. He made 2 pairs of gates. So this is the extra set. The guardhouse is not with us anymore. But the gates from the guardhouse that match these are, if you take a drive through the Citadel, our military college, which is beautiful, and you should do that while you're here. There's a driveway going between the two gates. On either side of the driveway is one of these gates, and the swords have been gold leafed. So that's the sword gates of Charleston. Guys, on our left is what our local brick looks like, called Charleston Gray Brick. That is what a basement looks like in Charleston. It's above ground most of the time. The house on our left is the Simmons Edwards house. That's two different owners of two different at two different times. You're all right, Leo. All right, you don't want to play with that. Take a look at the house. I'm gonna have to keep moving because Leo's not gonna play with his plywood. The house dates to 1800. Francis Simmons was the original owner. He sold it to George Edwards. George commissioned these carvings, these marble carvings above there. He asked an Italian stone carver to give him to give him acorns, so the Italian stone carver gave him Italian pine cones. People of Charleston call that pineapple gates. Look behind it, there's the kitchen and laundry and the carriage house, stable house. Here's the most expensive house that's sold in Charleston. Sold $13.5 million about 2.5 years ago. They've been fixing it up ever since. So you can look behind you and see your $13.5 million fixer-upper. I read the real estate section of the newspaper this morning over on East Battery Street. A house has just gone under contract that had been listed at $13.9 million. Nobody knows what the contract price is, but that's where it was listed. This house on the left, 8 Legree Street, but look what the mailbox says. 8.5. Uh-oh. They sold off their old carriage house. Somebody else owns it. They got to get their mail. They got to get the mail. So we had to insert an address. This street was numbered 200 years ago. We had to insert an address to get that accomplished. All right. The oak trees that we have here are called live oaks. They're called live oaks because they're always green. They never lose all their leaves because they're always losing their leaves. New growth pushes out the old growth continuously. Look how far they spread given half a chance. And you know, in a city hut like this, if you got a shade tree like that, you're going to love it. Any of y'all staying out near Kiowa, down on Johns Island? We got a county park with a 500-year-old oak tree called the Angel Oak. If you're traveling to Savannah or Beaufort, take a side trip and go see the Angel Oak. In my opinion, this is one of the finest estates in Charleston. This is the William Gibbs estate. Predates the American Revolutionary War. There's your above-ground Charleston basement. Marble, we know that's imported. The vine growing there is Japanese creeping fig. In Charleston, your fancy entertaining floor is your second floor. If that's the basement, that's the first floor. Your second floor is all the way at the top. You see the top 4 windows on the right have matching draperies. That's the ballroom of this house. Look in the backyard, you see the old kitchen building. All right, I'm gonna squeeze in a little history lesson for you guys because you're trapped and you can't get off the carriage. 1640s, the King of England is Charles I. He wanted to name a new world colony after himself. You can do that if you're king. And if you're king, you're not stuck using your old boring British name of Charles. You can get wild and fancy and use the Latin form of your name. And the Latin form of the British name Charles is Carolus. You want to name your colony Land of Charles in Latin, you would call it Carolina. That sound familiar? No. North and South Carolina are named for Charles I, who was a horrible king. And the Brits figured that out and lopped his head off. They kicked his 19-year-old son, also named Charles, out of the country. And Great Britain went an entire decade without a king or a queen. But they finally called back the young prince. They seated him on the throne. He's Charles II. Pretty darn excited to have been restored to his rightful throne. And he wants to thank the guys that made it happen. 8 men pulled the political strings. Their reward, the land of Carolina. The king gave away all the land named for his father. The land from Virginia down to Jacksonville, Florida. Goes to 8 guys, the 8 lords proprietors of Carolina. These are rich businessmen. They want to make money. Whoa, 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 whoa. So they're rich businessmen. They want to make money. And their idea to make money is to copy Britain's most successful colony of their time. This happens to be the island of Barbados. Barbados has got indentured and enslaved labor doing all the work, raising a cash crop of sugar cane. The planters are exporting sugar. They're getting Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates crazy rich. And that's the plan for Carolina. The proprietors recruited about 100 settlers in Great Britain. Then went straight on down to Barbados and picked up 50 more. 1/3 of the first settlers to this colony came from Barbados. They came sailing in here 353 years ago, April of 1670. Whoop, step G, step G. They planted their flag and named their town Charlestown in honor of King Charles II. We called ourselves Charlestown through the Revolutionary War. At the end of the Revolution, we shortened our name to Charleston. So that's how you guys came to visit Charleston. So here's your recap. North and South Carolina named for Charles I. Charleston, South Carolina named for Charles II. Who is the current reigning monarch of Great Britain? Charles III. He's been here twice. He was Prince Charles in 1990 when he visited. He has visited this city twice. I'm going to tell you about this house right here, 1767. Colonel John Stewart lived there. John Stewart was an English colonist. He worked for the King of England. He was Commissioner of Indian Affairs. So he was the liaison between the King of England, or between the country of Great Britain and the native people. Now, about 7 years after he built that house, we're coming up on a revolution. So this guy has to decide where his loyalties are going to lie. So who do you think he went with? You think he went with the king, or you think he went with the patriots? Who's signing his paycheck? King. So he was a Tory. So it became a little inhospitable for him to live here. So he left and left his house behind. The patriots took it over. They decided to throw a party up in there with this beautiful mansion. They filled the house with guests. They filled the house with alcohol. They barred the doors and windows and forbade anyone from leaving until the alcohol was consumed. One of the men they locked inside was named Francis Marion, local militia leader, teetotaler, didn't drink alcohol. He's having none of this debauchery. He drops out of a second-story window to get away from it. That breaks his ankle. Broken ankle sends him out to his plantation where he recovers. While he's recovering, the British seize the city of Charleston. He's not here. He lives to fight another day, which is exactly what he does. He raises a militia. He strikes the Brits with a band of 2 dozen guys, and they go scamper out in the swamps, and the Brits can't follow them. This earns him a nickname. Y'all know that nickname? Swamp Fox. Swamp Fox. So you guys are younger than me, but not by much. In the 1950s, there was a television show called Swamp Fox with Leslie Nielsen as a star, weekly Disney series about Francis Marion of Charleston, of South Carolina. Y'all remember I told you we had an earthquake? I want you to look around here and see if you see any signs of earthquake damage anywhere around here. Which one's leaning?
Well, that one's leaning just a little bit right there, yeah.
The one on the right or the one on the left?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We remember the ground rolled like the waves of the sea. 1886. All right, I also taught you another little fun thing about our fractional addresses. So you see these folks on the left-hand side in front of that green house. That green house is 82 Trad Street, but the Chevrolet is parked at 82 and a half. So you guys get ready. You got your camera ready. I want you to see 82 and a half Trad Street. There's 82 and a half Trad Street.
Oh my
goodness. He's just a big puppy. Scottish Presbyterians brought something very Scottish to Charleston, South Carolina. The first golf club in America was here in Charleston. It's called Charleston Green. You're a golfer? So over and Charleston is spelled exactly like Charleston without the C. One has nothing to do with the other. Charleston is a family that owned land, pasture land over around where the College of Charleston is today. All right, there's the South Carolina state flag in front of you if you're not familiar with it. Did you see the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson? That was Aunt Charlotte's house in the movie. That's where he dropped his kids off to be with his sister-in-law while he went and fought a war. We filmed the scene of The Patriot right here. We put a camera up on Aunt Charlotte's piazza. We aimed it right here between these columns. We're recreating a scene from 1776, American Revolution. We got an effigy of King George III hanging right there. And it's supposed to be 1776, but nobody from the film crew bothered to look at carved in stone in the background. It says Hall erected 1804. So go watch that today. You will see that has been digitally erased from the movie. Yep. Here's the oldest church building in Charleston. St. Michael's Church, 1761. The graveyard gates are open. That means come in and take a look around. Two signers of the Constitution buried in there. The church doors are open. That means come in and take a look around. Any church, any graveyard, any doors open, it's not an accident. That's you can come in and take a look around. Let me tell you what these buildings are. St. Michael's Church, the old post office and federal courthouse. There's the original State House of South Carolina, and through the columns over there is our City Hall. Robert Ripley of Ripley's Believe It or Not named this the Four Corners of Law back in the 1930s. He thought these buildings were interesting. According to Robert Ripley, your four corners of law in Charleston are city law, state law, federal law, and God's law. Charlestonians know it's the only corner in the country where you can get your mail, go to jail, pay your bail, and say your age. You see the stone street? I already told you we don't have stone. That didn't come here. That didn't come from here, it came to here. That was ballast stone in the bottom of ships. Tall masted ships crossing the Atlantic, if they were not filled with cargo, they would augment their load with those stones. That would sink the ship deeper in the water, stabilize the voyage across. When they got here, we're like, hey, we can use that. We paved the streets with it. We infill the edge of the downtown peninsula. We're between two rivers, 4 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. Our rivers rise and fall with the tides. Downtown was surrounded by marshland, and that marshland has been systematically landfilled over time. We are back into the area that I told you burned down in 1861. Everything in front of us is built after 1861. Where the South Carolina state flag is hanging is a modern bank building that sits on the site of Institute Hall. Institute Hall was the largest auditorium in town in 1860. 1860 is when the United States announced that Abraham Lincoln had won the presidential election. Charleston and South Carolina are not fans of this guy Lincoln, so when he won, South Carolina quit the United States. They signed a document doing so on this site. In less than a year, it had burned to the ground. The little social hall right there, Robert Mills of Charleston designed that. Robert Mills is America's first native-born professionally trained architect. Robert Mills designed the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. So the first circular church that burned down on this site was by Robert Mills, but that building survived. Look at the graves that look like a bed. You got a headboard, side rails, and a footboard. Here you got a double bed, the marble right behind the banner there. All right, I want y'all to think about this. I'm not teasing, work with me on this. Why would you have a grave marker that looked like a bed? What is the purpose of that? So you could rest in peace for your eternal rest. Now, what happens if your family planted flowers inside a grave marker that looked like a bed? What would you call that? A flower bed. What happened if the flower they chose to plant was a daisy? You're 6 feet under. What are you doing?
Pushing up daisy.
All right, yeah, you better wait. The oak trees that you see here are indigenous, so are the palm trees. The palms are called palmettos. If you saw the South Carolina state flag, it features a palmetto tree. And that harkens back to a battle we had at the beginning of the Revolutionary War. We knew the Brits were coming. We were too rich for them to leave us alone. We were the richest of all British North American colonies. So we prepared for the British by building a fort out in our harbor out of these trees. We did not finish. We only had 3 out of 4 walls built when the British showed up with 9 warships, 300 cannons. Everyone was amazed when they opened fire. Their bombs did no damage. Our trees are so soft and squishy, they don't splinter or explode under cannon fire. Look at them, it looks like a sponge. The Brits could not blow up the walls of the fort, so they had to come up with an alternative plan. Their alternative plan, sail around the backside. There's no wall to protect the soldiers there. They could have killed everybody in there. But they accidentally ran aground on sandbars. Their sitting ducks, the American militia, tore them up. Tore them up until high tide. At high tide, what's left of their little navy went limping out of here. This is considered a victory for the Americans. The date of this American victory is June 28, 1776. Let that sink in. The last week of June in 1776. What happened the next week? Signed Declaration of Independence. All right. You guys know the difference between a graveyard and a cemetery? No. So this cemetery on the right, cemetery is not attached to a church. A graveyard is. So behind the ironwork is the graveyard of St. Philip's, and over there is the cemetery of St. Philip's. Let's see. Buried in the cemetery is John C. Calhoun, twice Vice President of the United States of America. Now, John was not from Charleston. He was from South Carolina. He's from the upper left corner of South Carolina. But his wife was from Charleston, and I love her name. Mrs. Calhoun was Floride Calhoun. You cannot make this up. Floride Calhoun. Does that sound like a cousin to anybody but me? Okay. So John dies. Cousin Flo buries him over in the cemetery of St. Philip's. Well, about 10 years later, the Civil War bubbles this ugly head. People of Charleston have a horrifying realization. They are aware that John C. Calhoun is despised outside of the South. And they believe that if the Union Army were to invade Charleston, they would seek out John's body and desecrate his remains. The people of Charleston are not about to let that happen. Given that situation, they did the only logical thing they could do. The people of Charleston themselves went and dug up John C. Calhoun's body. They secretly removed him from the cemetery and planted him across the street in the graveyard. And it worked. Everybody forgot about John. Nobody found his body. Nobody desecrated his remains. They all forgot about him. Everybody but one little old lady. Little old lady stood up in church and addressed the congregation. She said, "Look, y'all, I'm old. I'm soon to meet my maker. I'm going to be needing my plot." Except John C. Calhoun is lying in it. It's a true story. What do you think happened next? They dug him up, put him back where he started. Charlestonians would tell you John C. Calhoun crossed Church Street more times after death than he ever did in life. John's daughter inherited his estate. Her husband was an attorney named Thomas Green Clemson. Clemson University is the old John C. Calhoun estate. All right, City Markets in front of you, been up and running since 1807. Used to be your grocery store. Now this is where the locals set up shop. The crop that made Charleston rich was rice. The people that were enslaved here were brought from the rice-growing areas of West Africa, the rice coast of Africa. They brought this handicraft of sewing baskets with them. This is local marsh grass sewn together with the fronds of a palmetto tree. That lovely lady right there is Ms. Manigo with those incredible baskets right there. Ms. Manigo, you got anything you want to tell these people?
Yes, come on back.
All right, got it. Good job, buddy. Good job. Let's hear it for Leo, everybody. Yay, Leo. Y'all were a lot of fun. I enjoyed having you. I hope y'all have a wonderful visit. I hope you will come back and see us.
But anyway, probably one of the best parts of our trip so far. So we really enjoyed it.
We were bad people in Charleston. Oh no.
Well, we would like to thank our tour guide and Leo. And we hope you enjoyed the tour around Charleston. Stick around, maybe you'll see some of this next week. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done it already. And until next time, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.